And before this video begins, I'd like to give a special shout out to my Asbantium level patron, Fallon Cortez. When it comes to Doctor Who, the companions are one of the most important aspects of the show, travelling with the Doctor throughout space and time. However, in the modern version of the show, the companions' families are also important because they're essentially a physical extension of the companion and provide a sense of scale and personal stakes. It shows us who they are leaving behind and who is in danger during the events of present day stories, like Jackie being attacked by Autons and both Sylvia and Wilf being trapped within smog. The families anchor the companions to the setting and our own world, but something the show is focused on specifically is the mothers of the companions. The mothers of Doctor Who are often overlooked unless you're a thirsty Twitter user. On an initial viewing, it might seem like the show actively hates mothers due to how abrasive and prickly they can be towards other characters, but this couldn't be further from the truth, because these mothers are actually deep characters with their own specific journeys, yet another dimension of the show and its characters.
Go online and pretend you're a doctor.
I am a doctor.
Prove it. Stitch this, mate.
Jackie Tyler is by far the most developed and nuanced family figure in Doctor Who. When we first meet her, she's a comically soap opera style mother, but over the course of the series we see under the surface and understand her deeper character traits and motivations. Understanding her protectiveness of Rose comes from losing her husband Pete. Initially, Jackie hates the Doctor because he's the reason Rose vanished for an entire year without explanation. It's understandable that she would blame him and not trust him, but Aliens of London and World War III tell a story of her slowly coming to terms with this lifestyle, being confronted with the harsh reality of aliens and the risks the Doctor and Rose take to stop them. By the end of the story, she begrudgingly trusts the Doctor, although there's still that brilliant moment at the end of World War III where she asks if Rose will be safe, but he can't answer that and the question remains lingering in the air. Knowing Jackie is waiting back on Earth makes Rose's supposed death during Dalek so impactful, because you truly understand the Doctor's guilt. He had a duty of care and Jackie trusted him to keep her safe. So even though Rose survives, it builds constant underlying tension whenever she is in danger. Under her tough and shouty exterior, Jackie cares about Rose more than anything else. So the show doesn't tell a simple story of, haha, Rose's mum bad. It's a realistic story about a mother struggling to accept her daughter's independence because of all the danger and mystery involved. This all culminates in Parting of the Ways, where the Doctor realises there's no way for him to survive the Dalek invasion of the game station. He's already seen Rose face death multiple times under his care, so this time he makes the conscious choice to honour Jackie's request and send Rose home, giving her back to Jackie where she can be safe. The reason this plot point works so well and forms such an emotional core is because Jackie has had a constant ongoing presence. From phone calls to full appearances, Series 1 builds Jackie's character so we can fully understand her personality and relationships with other characters. She's never truly villainised for her character traits, even when she slaps the Doctor. Instead, it just shows that she is a real person. The establishment of her and the Doctor disliking each other creates that payoff in Parting of the Ways because the Doctor still respects Jackie, knowing how important Rose is to her.
He did the right thing. He sent you back to me.
This reluctant mutual respect continues throughout Series 2, the pair accepting their places within Rose's life. The Ninth Doctor and Jackie were always very antagonistic towards each other right from the get-go, and it made for a fun dynamic. However, after his regeneration into the 10th Doctor, they actually became quite close, and Jackie even fills in as a companion for a little bit during Army of Ghosts, with the Doctor also playing matchmaker and hooking her up with alternate universe Pete. It's a brilliant evolution of their character relationship and takes advantage of the show elevating Jackie into a more central character during Series 2. Indeed, Love and Monsters capitalises on this by showing us the continuing effect the lifestyle has on Jackie, reminding the audience of this family Rose has left behind. It again leads to the Doctor honouring his promise, knowing Rose needs her family more than she needs him, so he forces her to travel to the parallel Earth because of Jackie. It's a good way to wrap up the ongoing plot thread of Jackie and her relationship with both major characters, serving as a testament to the storytelling power of using family figures within the show. The flip side of Jackie is Martha Jones's mother, Francine, whose character is a lot less nuanced than her Series 1 and 2 counterpart. Unlike Jackie, Francine gets locked into the bitterness and mistrust Jackie started with, without the softening in World War III. Francine's mistrust is framed realistically, since Martha suddenly shows up with this complete stranger she's never even mentioned before. And if that's not suspicious enough, that same night a scientist turns into a giant scorpion creature trying to kill everyone, with the Doctor gleefully running into danger and dragging Martha along with him. Obviously this would send Francine's motherly spidey sense into overdrive, which isn't exactly helped by the shady people constantly whispering poison into her ear, suggesting the Doctor is dangerous. Unlike Jackie, who goes through that whole process of accepting and trusting the Doctor, Francine is immediately manipulated by outside forces. She doesn't have someone to come bursting in and hit Saxon's people with a chair, so she falls victim to confirmation bias, Saxon's people constantly telling her what she wants to hear. Everything takes place over the course of just 3 days, so she's never given a chance to see Martha's point of view, like how Jackie got to see the positives of the relationship between the Doctor and Rose. Francine's storyline kind of reflects the Doctor's failure to foster even a neutral relationship with the companion's family. His constant presence allowed him to slowly chip away Jackie's abrasive exterior, but he isn't able to do that with Francine, and it leads to the whole family being captured by the Master, not allowing the Doctor to send Martha back like he did with Rose. Instead, Martha has to take control and save everyone, because that relationship breakdown led to all of this. Eventually, Francine's forced servitude under the Master allows her to accept the Doctor because she finally realises how manipulated she was, and her eyes are open to the importance of the Doctor to both her daughter and the entire universe. She finally takes the Doctor's side by refusing to shoot the Master, and her storyline culminates in a perfect wordless scene. Just this simple shared smile says so much about how his characters have changed. It's that same mutual respect he and Jackie had developed, knowing the danger but also knowing the lengths the Doctor will go to look after people, learning to trust him. The Davis-era mother that the Doctor never develops a mutual respect with is Sylvia Noble, who is by far the most negative portrayal of a mother in Doctor Who history. She's constantly snarky and pessimistic throughout her time in the show, pretty much a constant reminder of how much Donna herself has changed since her very first appearance in The Runaway Bride. Donna was a very loud and grating character, but in Series 4 we come to realise that this all stems from Sylvia's own personality. It shows how people can be shaped by their own parents. Sylvia represents the life Donna wants to run from, to get away from this constant nagging and patronising, so that she can meet the Doctor again and feel valued. Even when she's travelling with the Doctor, Donna still can't say anything to Sylvia and has to pretend to still be jobless and unambitious. Sylvia is frankly a terrible mother who actively refuses to see any of Donna's potential, underestimating her own daughter, which is a major plot point in Series 4. We often see Donna falling back into her negative mindset and losing confidence in herself because of Sylvia's lack of faith, which creates a persistent sense of inferiority. It's a sharp contrast to Jackie, who allowed Rose to be her own person and pursue her ambitions as long as she made sure she still made time for her mother. There's never a single moment in Series 4 where Sylvia actually gives Donna credit. No matter what Donna tries to do, Sylvia always shoots her down. Even when they're in a post-apocalyptic dystopia, Donna's desperate attempts at optimism are completely rejected, even when she just tries to make a simple joke.
Then we'll complain. Who's going to listen to us?
Sylvia isn't badly written because you're meant to dislike her. We as the viewer are meant to understand how much she's holding her daughter back by controlling her life and nagging her. It perfectly underlines Donna's character development, especially as there's a whole episode around the importance of her making her own life decisions. In Turn Left, Donna is presented with two choices. She could turn left to get a temp job at H.C. Clements, allowing the Runaway Bride to happen, or she could turn right and work a different job, which Sylvia wants her to do. However, by listening to Sylvia, it leads to complete chaos and the death of hundreds of millions of people, since it completely changes the fate of the Doctor. It's a representation of how Sylvia holds Donna back by refusing to hold any hope or respect for her daughter. She plays everything too safe and constantly blames the Doctor for being dangerous without realising he and Donna are the ones saving them all. This culminates in Journey's End, when all of Donna's character development is ripped away from her and her memory is wiped. We had seen Donna grow and improve, listening more to the Wilfs and Doctors in her life instead of the Sylvias. It's only after all of this that Sylvia finally sticks up for her daughter.
She was the most important woman in the whole wide universe.
She still is.
And maybe you should tell her that once in a while.
Jackie and Francine may have been abrasive people, but they still cared deeply about their families underneath. Sylvia is just abrasive, so her journey is learning to appreciate what she actually has, which comes to fruition in the end of time where she's at least a little bit nicer to Donna, although still nowhere near as much as she probably should.
Oh, love from Donna. Did you keep the receipt?
Yes, I did.
When Russell T Davies handed control of Doctor Who over to Stephen Moffat, the show underwent several major changes. One of these was a change of focus away from the home lives of the companions. As part of the Cracks in Time storyline, Amy's parents were absent from Series 5, but even after their brief reappearance in The Big Bang, they completely vanish again in favour of Rory's dad Brian in Series 7, who was only ever written by Chris Chibnall. So the families of Amy and Rory played a very minor role in the show, especially the mothers who were almost non-existent. There's nothing wrong with removing the home life aspect of the show, but it also removes the sense of the companions leaving people behind or having people to go back to. Even Clara and Bill's parents were relegated to backstories or plot devices. Clara's parents exist almost solely as a way to set up the ending of the Rings of Akaton, never appearing again until her dad briefly shows up in Time of the Doctor, and apparently he decided to just completely change what he looked like. Bill has neither parent, but her mum shows up as a plot device Vision a couple of times, without even having a character since Bill created an entire fake personality for her. Even Bill's foster mother only appears in 2 stories and doesn't get much characterization. There isn't even any mention of her during Lie of the Land, where the entire world has become a dystopia. All of Moffat's companions exist in somewhat of a vacuum, nothing tying them to the Earth they came from. Therefore, unlike the Davies era companions, the Doctor isn't bound by a promise to a parent. We don't have the constant sense that this whole time there's a poor mother waiting for a child to come home and always worrying that they won't. Stephen Moffat's successor Chris Chibnall tried to bring back a sense of home life for the companions, to recapture that anchor and sense of consistency that the Davies era had. In the very first episode of Series 11, we're introduced to new companion Ryan's grandmother Grace and her husband Graham. Initially, it seems as though these two characters will be that consistent presence back on present day Earth that we can revisit, but then Grace dies in the same episode she's introduced, and Graham also immediately becomes a companion, so there's no real time to develop their family dynamics, kind of like Jackie dying during the climax of Rose. Ryan's dad also only shows up for 1 episode, and Yaz's family are never really shown outside of 1 episode and a couple of minor cameos. Her mum starts off the same way as Jackie and Francine, not entirely trusting this person who has suddenly appeared in her daughter's life, but it never really goes anywhere outside of her wondering if they're shoving their tongues down each other's throats, which they probably end up doing, so I guess you could call it motherly instinct. Oh, and don't forget Dan's parents, who show up for like 2 scenes, literally all just to give him a wok. Brilliant. All these families create a weird midpoint between the Davies and Moffat styles, because the families are all there to be used, but they never are. We get a Father's Day situation with Yaz and her grandma, but that's the furthest the era ever goes with exploring the families of the companions. You don't even get the reactions of families during major events like the Series 11 or Series 13 finales, where the entire planet Earth was under threat. The most we ever get is a throwaway comedic scene in Spyfall Part 2. That's about it. The families become props, rather than people who inhabit a world with unique relationships with the Doctor that change over time based on their interactions. So there's basically nothing for me to say regarding them. Doctor Who has proven many times that it has a particular focus on mothers. It doesn't even stop with the mothers of main characters. There have always been positive and negative examples of these figures in numerous stories. Even Donna herself briefly became a mother in Forest of the Dead, showing her fierce loyalty and love for her artificially generated children. Motherhood in Doctor Who has almost always been portrayed as a good thing. Obviously you get the bad apples like Ambrose, who committed murder and started a war, and Rosanna, the fish vampire who tried to destroy Venice. But on the whole, mothers have often been portrayed as very sympathetic and powerful figures. We see a lot of single mothers protecting their children from the weight of the world, and the Doctor Dances even chronicles the journey of a young single mother embracing her motherhood despite the social stigma of her situation. Motherhood has been the solution multiple times, saving the entire world from destruction or alien occupation. It's clear to see that Doctor Who sees a lot of value in the parental bond between mothers and their children, placing it at the centre of many stories and using it to explore the developing relationships between Doctor and companion. Russell T Davies used mothers to illustrate the realistically nuanced home lives of the companions, how their family dynamics were sometimes abrasive but ultimately from a place of love. Stephen Moffat preferred to use mothers as storytelling tools for his companions' tragic backstories, but regardless of their roles within stories, mothers have always had a firm place in Doctor Who, and Doctor Who doesn't hate them even if they do have a tendency to slap the main character.
All of the mothers, every time.
And I'd like to give an extra special thank you to my Asbantium level patron Fallon Cortez, my Diamond level patron Daniel Shillito, my Platinum level patron Keelan Gillespie, and all my Gold patrons Calvin, Franz Horn aka Line Vortex, George, Herna Verzog, and Luke_SY. Thank you so much for your support.